Alright, first thing first. In the last video I said that Scrap Mechanic no longer has a way to import or export your creations, to which several of you have corrected me and said, no, dum-dum, you can save it on your lift and respawn it at the garage. Well, let's take this little flyer for example, and sure enough, place it on the lift, E to use, you can save it. And the garage that the comments we're talking about is, in this particular world, about 4.3 kilometers northeast of the crashed ship. The garage itself is located inside of the scrap city, and it's pretty easy to find because it has these blue banners on top. Just be careful, there's usually a bunch of bots when you first get here, and even a couple of farm bots. Once you discover the garage, you can open your handbook and it will be under items. Scrap garage, crashed ship. And set a waypoint so you can easier find it next time. At the garage, go up the stairs and you will see a big build panel. From here you can select anything that you have saved, either from creative or from your survival, doesn't matter. And once you select something you like, you will have the assemble creation menu that will give you a whole list of parts that you need to get. Once you get these parts, they will actually be deposited in this garage chest right here. Now, of course, I'm playing in a developer mode, so I have everything in the backpack available, which had me confused for the longest time, because if you have, let's say, something extremely complex, like this little bus that I built in a modded game called Route 41, by the way, highly recommend. Anyway, as you can see, it requires a whole bunch of stuff. Now, I'm in a developer mode. I technically should have everything. Load parts, and it's only 24%. As I found out, this chest has an expansion port on the side. So, grab some pipes, and grab the extra large chest, wherever it is. And the garage chest can be expanded, well, pretty much indefinitely. And now, if you have enough parts, load everything, it's up to 100%, you can assemble it, and your creation will spawn. The garage is pretty big, so you can spawn some sizable machinery in here. And by the way, this very large complex machine that was featured in the last video and was in the thumbnail, it is up on a workshop already, available as Linkage demo. It does take quite a few different parts, so just be ready for that, but still, something to experiment with if you so desire. Now on to the topic of today's video, the turrets. Because after the last video, I realized that while having something off to the side or behind requires some really complex linkages, having something simply above will be much easier, and well, that's one of the uses for the entire idea. Because that way you can protect your seat real well while having the turrets up in the open where they can shoot their targets. Coincidentally, while I was experimenting with that, Mr. Magic in my comments had similar idea. And my original design was this. You have a crusher around the farm, a giant wall separating the farm from the turret. The turret itself is mounted on a big L shape and has two vertical linkages going down to the seat. Now, of course, you got your typical spud containers, electric engine to actually rotate the turret, because this is a basic force sensor model that it just detects a base it sits on and fires every time it does. And it works alright up to a certain angle where it just bumps into the stand. It's okay for a small base defense, But at that point I thought that's as good as a turret can be. However, the comments started rolling in, and so after reading those, I built the second iteration of the turret. In particular, Nolan suggested building a ring around the base of a turret that slides on the same floor that the turret is on. That way you don't have that one tower either off to the side or behind. And Sky Reaper suggested, well, what about attaching to the back of the seat instead of to the sides? I tried that, and the reason I didn't try it before is because, well, it's quite obvious. It gets in the way of the camera, which I think Sky Reaper kind of realized himself after posting. Anyway, it does work. It's just a little derpy, and you need a window to be able to aim. On the other hand, you can sort of use that as an aiming reticle if you build it better than just a big square. Anyway, this farm was built on a cliffside, which turned out to be a really good location because nothing spawns downhill. Nothing can get to you from downhill. There is no more giant wall. And because there is so little stuff around the turret, well, not only do you get a full 360 rotation, but also camera doesn't run into things. So for example, if I was to build a wall here, then get in a seat, as I try to move the camera around, instead of looking behind the wall, it kind of zooms in, and this gets real confusing real quick, especially when you're trying to deal with a big raid. The turret is still a basic force sensor rotating design, powered by an electric engine, which takes surprisingly little power. These 10 batteries have lasted many hours. The seat itself does have a little roof over the top just to protect it from paint bots, because if paint ever hits you, it automatically just kicks you out of the seat immediately. It doesn't do any damage to you, though. There is a short wall here just to keep direct fire like tape bots at bay. And off in the distance, we have concrete blocks, concrete barriers with cardboard over the top, just to kind of guide every bot in the middle. There. That should be enough for a nice tier 3. Let's see what kind of shenanigans will happen this time. Looks like everybody's dropping behind the wall, which is good. Some bots are starting to come in. There's a propane and propane accessories guide over there. Farm bot, he shouldn't be a problem. There he goes. Bounce bots are coming in hot. Oh. Causing me a little bit of a problem. Then get off my turret, you bastard. Yeah, this farm does not have a crusher, unlike the first one. Simply because I just wanted to experiment. That's paint bots are, I thought they were up. A couple more way in the distance. One is hanging onto a cliff over there. This is probably where a higher tower would have been more beneficial, just to get guys like these. But at least now that the major threats are dealt with, some totes are not a big deal. Yeah, I think there is a farm or the hay bot somewhere back behind here. Nope, just a tape bot. Alright. Did quite a bit of damage to the concrete, but that's expected. These bumpers, by the way, they are really easy to make once you do the appropriate quest and have them available. They take something like 10 metal to a little bit of paint, a little bit of chemical, but they are durability of 8, which is the same as metal block 3, which is really difficult to obtain. Okay, on the last one, crop. Not bad at all, especially with the pounce bots causing troubles. When I first read about the ring idea, I thought it was going to be really unstable, just because it relies on physics of parts sliding on other parts. However, yeah, it moves around a little bit, but it's not terrible at all. It holds accuracy pretty darn well. Moving on to a comment by Cyan God, who says, you could probably use either suspension or pistons to make a mouse control part go full 360. That is correct. If you don't want to have sliding parts and you don't want to rely on physics, you actually can have a turret that can spin full 360 degrees using pistons to clip through parts of itself and parts of the structure around it. Alright, a demo of a retractable turret that can spin full 360 degrees. Feel free to use it as you see fit. However, if you do keep it on a vehicle or in a vehicle, as Butan pointed out, let's say you use a turret, put it in the down position, then go to drive around, the turret will still try to remain pointed in the direction where you left it. So if you go off to the side too far, it will start to try to clip into the walls and things. What I found out that does help with it is to point it in the right direction, then grab your vehicle, put it on the lift, take it down, and now you can drive it around with a turret staying stationary relative to the vehicle. Hopefully this bug will be fixed soon, although I'm starting to have ideas where I can use 1 or 2 seats like that pointed towards a location for basically navigation. If you do decide to build a turret, it is much easier to do so while it is on the lift. So place a seat on a pedestal, then remove the pedestal so it's a free object. Build another little stand. Weld the seat sideways to the stand. Now you can pick it up on the lift and work on all of the linkages freely without them flopping around, and while being able to line everything up, and it will also allow you to weld parts together, something that you cannot do off the lift. You will have to do it quite often though, since it is a bunch of bearings and it is a bunch of different objects as far as the game is concerned. If you decide to replicate the expanding turret, then you will need 2 long pistons on one side, or 1 if you decide to only go with 1 link instead of 2, but you will need 2 pistons on the other side, because the bottom piston allows the control linkages to clip through, while the top piston allows the supporting structure for the turret to clip through. Also keep in mind that because you have 2 pistons on one side working together, each of them needs to be at roughly half speed compared to single pistons. That way they raise and lower together and don't try to twist the top portion out of shape. For demonstration purposes, put 2 of these at the same speed as these, and you can see it trying to push and pull one side twice as fast as the other. Another quick note about these style of turrets is that the rotation bearing needs to be in line with the seat, while the up and down pivot bearing can be anywhere, but it has to be in line with the pivot bearings on the control rods. As to why bother with raised turrets in the first place, well, as you have probably noticed, the bots would try to target the seat, but they will never try to target anything above the seat. So, turret like that is out in the open, but it never gets hit with anything and stays perfectly safe.